So, Malo, thanks so much for coming onto the channel and allowing me to ask you what you were thinking. I know it might be a bit of a direct question, but I genuinely do want to know. And in case you're not familiar with Malo Beats, he's got a super duper dope YouTube channel. I got a bunch of his links down below. MPC Extraordinaire right here. And yeah, man, I mean, what brought me to your channel was the MPC 2000 XL stuff, because I love watching some vintage MPC stuff. But then around the same time that you got your Live 2 was the same time that I got my Live 2. So thank you, because I learned a ton on how to use that thing from you. So really appreciate that. But more direct and more to the point, recently we were talking about, you hit me up and saying like, yo, I got some pedals. And,
oh, yeah.
And I just want to know, well, why? Like, why now? Why? What brought you to them and all that stuff? Because, I mean, my history with, well, you know what? I don't want to color the conversation. So we'll leave it at that. Oh, and by the way, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, but more on them later. So yeah, back to it. Why'd you get pedal?
Well, it's so funny because I actually, well, first of all, thank you for having me right here. It's been awesome to be right here checking out your space. Y'all don't see it, but I see it and it's awesome. But the pedals, I actually got into pedals before I was, doing beats and all that stuff. I would mix records, and there's this plugin. It's by UAD. I forget the name of it, but it's a pedal plugin. It has like 2 knobs on it. In a lot of the records that I would use, I would throw that in as parallel processing. They had nothing to do with hip hop. It wasn't like rap music or anything like that. It was just regular instrumental music, but I would still use this guitar pedal while I was mixing. And I've always thought about it. I also used to be a runner at New Monkey Studio out here in Van Nuys. And all these people would come in with different guitar pedals, and all these bands were like rock bands. So I always kind of had the idea of like, yo, that would be so cool to put guitar pedals in the workflow that I'm using with samples, drums, just to add texture into the sound that I'm doing. So I always had that idea until I finally pulled the trigger. And once I did, I'm like, I don't know why I did not do it before, but that's kind of like my whole idea, just kind of adding different textures to the sound that I'm doing. Again, we're sampling music, and when we're sampling music, I really want to do my best to kind of shape it my own.
Yeah.
So pedals is an awesome way to just add some color to what I'm sampling in there.
Right.
So that's been really fun to do.
So I guess that then begs the question, you're using the Live 2, right? Majority of the time, or the MPC 1. Do you use a DAW right now?
Nah,
not really.
Not really. It's so funny because I was mixing. So my background was always more like, I'll make my beat on the 2000 XL. That's what I would use. And when I would make my beat on the 2000 XL, I would stem out each individual track, mix in Pro Tools. Now, not that I'm thinking about like, I want to be standalone. I don't think about that. It just happens to be that I just don't, like, I'm not even stemming out no more.
Yeah.
Without me thinking about it, I'm just mixing my whole beat on the MPC 1 and Live 2. And maybe I'll do a little bit of mastering in Ableton. But I'm finishing everything on the MPC. It just has everything that I need. It sounds great. If I feel the track sounds good, I'm pushing it out. Yeah. I'm going to master it, and it's done.
That was me on the 4K. I feel like I was the MPC 4000. Forgive the lingo.
Yeah, it's like the 4K.
I felt as if I was the most productive on there because it was just like, you just make the track. Oh, cool, it sounds good.
Yeah.
And export it.
Yeah, that's where, not to go too much into my background, but we were just talking about it, but I was mixing records, I was mixing different bands. It was nothing, had to do with hip hop or anything like that. But make long story short, I kind of fell out of love with it because I got so deep into mixing. Mixing is so deep. It's like, you can never end, I got too deep into it that I fell out of love with that craft, and I took some time away from music or audio in general. And now that I'm coming back into it with just doing what I love, not mixing records for other bands, just doing what I love, I'm having more fun, not to get too complicated. I know already if I stem out my beat and I go into the DAW, oh man, like I'm gonna be like the EQ, the 5 kilohertz, the this, the that, and I get too complicated with it, and it's not fun for me no more. So I'm just having fun doing quick touches on the MPC Live, whether you call it a rough mix, but that's my best mix, the rough mix. When I go too deep into it, I lose the vision that I had initially. And I'm always like, I like my rough mix better. So I'm just like, I'm sticking within the MPC and finishing on the MPC. And I feel like that just has a better feeling to me.
So then I guess I might be trying to solve an equation that doesn't even exist, but would you, the impression I'm getting is that with guitar pedals, maybe that's giving you a bit of the flexibility that you can get from like a DAW in terms of pedals without having to go in there. Right?
That's
it's like going into the candy store while you're on
Yeah.
a diet or something, but you're like, I need to grab that bottle of water.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I started getting different pedals and implementing them in my workflow, it just brought me so much like memories of, because I miss mixing. Like I really enjoyed that. Like I had so much fun.
Right.
I really like that. But now I'm able to have a little bit of that, not the whole thing, because if I get the whole thing, I'm going to spend hours and hours. I was like, I'm going to just get a few selected pedals that I really like the sound of these and work with those. And I like limitations. I don't like having all the plugins in the world. Again, that slows me down. But the few pedals that I have, I'm like, oh, I love the sound of these. I'll try different pedals out. I'm exploring different pedals as we go. But right now, that kind of brings a little more fun to my process. So that's been really fun right now. Definitely something just opening more ideas as I go.
So where do the pedals live in that setup then? Because I'm curious to know, you have an MPC, it's got left and right outputs, it's got some inputs, it's got multiple outs as well, I guess, depending on which one you have, of course. But then where is the pedal in that setup? Is it a return? Is it while you sample in?
Yeah, that's the difference between a lot of people actually tell me like, which one's better, the MPC one, the MPC Live. I'm like, when it comes down to workflow, they're identical. The difference that I would say to anybody is the hardware, like the I/O, the inputs and outputs. Yeah, you got the Live 2 is portable. That's awesome. But aside from the portability, to me is the I/O. Again, I keep forgetting that 2.11, the update, the 2.10 update now lets you hook up an interface to that, which expands your I/O. But you know, again, you have to attach something else. Like me, I just have my box, you know, and where these pedals come in is with those extra outputs. So right now I'm using, the MPC Live Mark II has 6 outputs. I'm using 1 and 2 to go into my DAW or go into my speakers. So 1 and 2 is already used. Now I have 3 all the way to 6 outputs, and I can use that to whatever I want. So I use, let's say, if I want to route my drum program on my MPC out of outputs 3, I'll go out of outputs 3 into one of my guitar pedals, come out of the guitar pedal into my sample inputs.
Cool.
And I'm coming back, either I'm going to resample that, or I'm just going to monitor and play back what I'm listening to as I print my beat.
Right, because then you can just play it live.
Exactly. Since I'm not mixing in the DAW no more, I can just print it with that sound, and I'll master it. In
so at this point, you already got all your samples in the MPC.
Yeah,
for the most part, right? I'm sure you can still. I mean, we act as if these setups need to be permanent, when in all reality, it's just like, dude, just unplug 2 cables and plug something else in, and you're just good to go, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so that's dope. Yeah, I was always curious to see where exactly you place the pedal in the MPC setup, because I used on the 60, it has like an echo out, which is a weird thing, but really it's just a send and return.
That's what I was gonna say. Is it like a send?
You just say send to echo, but it's just sending to an output.
Oh, that's how many outputs does this have?
It has 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah, okay. but on top of that, it has the echo out.
Actually, really?
Oh, it's not plugged in, just for looks.
Oh yeah.
Return right here. So mix out, left and right, and then you have the return here, and then you have where is it at? Is it not this one? Oh, no, it is here. Yeah, echo right there.
Oh, okay.
Weird.
So how many is that? That's that's.
So you just send the mix of your echo out into your pedal,
and you choose what goes in.
Then you just plug it into
okay.
whatever pedal you got,
and then you go back into it.
And then you come back into it.
Yeah, see, like that right there. That to me makes the Live Mark II worth it. Again, if some of you guys are just more like, I'm not really trying to mix in the box, or I'm sorry, in the MPC, I'll stem everything out, then yeah, you can go with the MPC 1, MPC Live, they're the same sound, like one is not better. But for me, that I want to stay just mixing in the MPC live, I like that flexibility. Maybe you're right now are like, I don't want to mess with that.
Right.
But maybe a year from now, you get more into it and you're just like, oh man, I want to start exploring. It gives you options to grow.
Totally.
Versus you're limited right here, you know, and I cannot use any more output. So that to me is worth it.
Yeah, a lot of times people will hit me up too, being like, which audio interface should I get? I have like a Minilog or like one synth. Should I just get like a 2i2, like a simple 2 input? And I'm like, dude, just save up and get like a 6 input or an 8 input. Check Craigslist.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
You're gonna like get. You're not gonna stop here.
Yeah, if you're really serious about it, you know you're gonna get more into it, and then you're gonna be like, man, I should have gone the extra outputs. Yeah. Versus like, man, I'm gonna stop
buying
right here.
Every level.
Unless it's somebody that's like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this. I'm gonna give it a shot. Then you know, maybe you just keep it low. But most of us are like excited to get into this new venture of making music and want to grow and continue to grow, right? So that just kind of gives more longevity when you have those extra options.
I guess so I kind of alluded a bit to my history with them, and it was very similar to yours, where it's like, oh, like I still laugh at myself for this, because when I was making music super duper early on, I don't know where I got this from, but I was under the impression that the sound should just sound good as it is. No effects. Effects are dumb. Don't use them, you know? And eventually I like threw a reverb on something. I was like, oh, that's how I get that sound. Okay, cool. That's literally impossible for me to get that sound any other way. And even with like delays and stuff, or like phasers, it's like, sure, you can do some weird things to try and get, like, sound manipulation to get that. But to the point, I don't know why it kept me waiting so long to get into effects, and not only effects, but then guitar pedals. Because after I got into effects, I would see guitar pedals everywhere. I used to be in a band. I had guitar pedals, but making the connection with beat making or house music or synthesizers, it just, like, for whatever reason, never made that connection. And I don't know what it was that caused me to wait so long. And I was wondering if you've ever put any thought into what made you wait so long, because I know you got into pedals. You said, like, you saw them around and all this stuff, and eventually you did, and you're like, oh, what have I been doing? Like,
I mean, I would always see them, and like I would see these musicians play with them, and I actually had one of the engineers that I would sit next to while he would be mixing. And as I would hear how he's mixing the guitars and DI with the you know the distorted one from the pedal, like, I was like, whoa, that is so cool. Like, I can do something like that, but my own way. I never did it. It's just probably because I don't know, I just never got around it. Again, like where I live, you know, it's like a small garage. Well, it's a living space. My wife hates it when I say that. It's a living space, but it's a garage. But right there, you know, to me, and I think that's why I'm standalone. Like, I'm mainly on standalone, because I cannot rack up my place with a bunch of gear and big units or nothing like that. But guitar pedals are so small, portable, and if I want to have 2, 3, 4, 5, I can just put them in their own spot. But for me, it was just not, like, I never got around it. And right now that I'm kind of growing more, and I'm falling in love so much with the whole music creation, of course, now I'm thinking about, like, all right, I'm going to do that, because I remember I thought about it, but I think it's just more like just growing and being creative as I'm growing into this new thing that I'm doing.
Right. So eventually you're like, cool. Because I mean, at the same time, it seems as if, because I've been watching your videos for a while, it seems as if you've been getting more and more comfortable, and I mean, like, for the lack of a better term, professional in being very specific about, this is my machine and I know it extremely well.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, to a point, maybe subconsciously, I'm putting words in your mouth, both you and I were working on our craft in a way until we finally felt comfortable enough that we're like, okay, cool, I think I got this down for the most part. Maybe now I can start exploring into other realms, right? Because that was kind of it for me too, because it's just you spend so much time doing something, but I know myself, if I get too many things at once, I don't know anything, because there's just too much to learn at once, and I just can kind of get overwhelmed. You know?
Yeah, I think that's actually funny you say that, because I believe in that. Like, I could be so comfortable with something where like an MPC, I almost feel like I could do an MPC with a beat with my eyes closed. And I feel so comfortable, which that could be a problem because it just creates habitual beats that I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. And it's producing the same sound. And it's like the same exact beat, but a different sample. And I'm like, oh man, like it just sounds so the same to me and it's not fun anymore. But now that I bring in something new, it could be a guitar pedal, a different sound effect. Now I listen as I'm running my drums through the, actually I have this one right here. I have this this hot wax. Actually, I made a video on this one not too long ago. But this thing just adds a whole different texture to my drums. And listening to that texture, whether it's good or bad, I don't even care. It's just fun for me. And I'm like, all right, this sounds fun. Now I'm getting different ideas on sampling, and it kind of like resets my brain. Again, I'm not trying to say like buy gear. And I'm over here, but it definitely gives me a different, perspective on music and ideas. So that always helps for I don't just keep it the same workflow nonstop. So that's.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because in like my notes of videos that I want to talk about, one is, it sounds a bit dire, but it's why I stopped using my MPCs. And mainly the 4000, I turned it on the other day, brought it out, cleared a bunch of space, turned it on, and my default template is still there with the same 4 kicks, the same 4 claps, the same 4 hats, same 4 percussion sounds. And I made a beat and I was just like, I feel like I made this beat the last time I turned it on. You know, and you just kind of you start falling into those routines. Of like, and the same thing happened with me when I had a Machine Micro by Native Instruments. I got so fast on that thing.
There's a small one, right? Yeah.
I could make a beat, put in the steps. I'm like, cool, put all the kicks here, put the open hats here, the claps there. And then like, I wouldn't even press play. I would make a beat without ever hearing it.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then just like hit play and be like, wait, I made this like an hour ago. You know, so I sold that. And then like I was saying, I kind of in a way, I feel like that's attributed to me not using my MPCs as much anymore because I've just kind of like, I just do the same things over and over and over again. So like you're saying, getting pedals and stuff has been something to kind of break it up and kind of that's actually what I like about the MPC workflow. Again, I'm sure there's other great drum machines and all that, but I'm just very familiar with the MPC. I love the fact that they give you those options to, you know, I think the MPC X even has more inputs, outputs. Again, maybe for some people it's like, I don't need all that stuff, but too much,
for me, I do like that because again, it just brings in new flavors to the sound that I'm producing within this box. Of course, you could just stay within the box and just create, they have amazing plugins. But for me, I enjoy bringing these new sounds to my production and just, I don't know, it just makes me rethink everything in a really good way.
So lastly, the last 2 things I want to get into are like major letdowns, I guess cons, and annoyances, right? But before we do that, I do want to give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, Squarespace. In case you're not familiar with Squarespace, it's an incredibly easy to use all-in-one website designer, hosting platform, and so much more. I've been using Squarespace long before I had this YouTube channel, so when they reached out to sponsor a few videos, I said, hell yeah, I'm already doing it. Let's go ahead and do it. So right now, it's currently where I host all my merch, like my hats, shirts, sample packs, synth presets, and even a contact me page. It's never been easier to get a professional looking website with a few clicks at such an affordable price. Some of my favorite features on Squarespace are the customized email links that expire within 24 hours. So when you're selling digital goods like music or videos, you don't need to worry about changing or chasing down links in case they get shared around. The website builder is also awesome with gorgeous templates to start from that you can easily tweak to make them feel like your own. For example, I'm using the Event Horizon template on my site, and within a few clicks, I was able to add a couple extra pages and really make it feel like mine. Trust me, I'd never be able to make a site look this good on my own. And lastly, all the extensions and integrations that Squarespace has with third-party companies. These help you facilitate your shipping, product design, taxes, and so much more. It's crazy how simple Squarespace makes it. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in starting a site or taking your music or your artistry or your brand to the next level, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/RickyTinez to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. All right, let's get back into it. All right, so lastly, I guess the two major points like we were mentioning earlier, we talked a little bit about this before we even started filming, but has there been any major annoyances with using pedals? Because I know I've had some, like we talked about, some pedals not having line input.
Oh,
Another
yes.
one kind of annoying is some are only mono.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, not to feed you.
Yeah.
This sucks. Mention these. Come on, guitar pedal companies, change things. Yeah, but and you mentioned phasing at one point.
Yeah, well, with the MPC, that's probably one of my biggest ones where like the small delay. Again, it's a few milliseconds. I've nudged in there to see. It's a few milliseconds, and the only times that it runs into a major problem for me is when I'm trying to parallel process something.
Okay.
I can still execute it, but it gets very complicated because I have to kind of know exactly how many milliseconds and nudge it over when I record it into an audio track. That's been something where it's just an extra step.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's an extra step. And another thing is there is some pedals that are mono and stereo. To me, it's not that bad because all my drums are mono. So I always work with mono drums. So when I'm sending out a drum program where it's my kick, hi-hat, snare, it's all in mono. So I'm sending all that out through a mono output into the guitar pedal. There is some guitar pedals that I actually have a stereo compressor. It's a small stereo compressor, which sounds amazing. That one is stereo, which it is cool, but when it's mono, I mean, I can't run samples through that because my samples isn't stereo.
Oh, right. And I guess that would be annoying because maybe there's a way to find a stereo merger, right? Where it'll take stereo and just merge it into a mono signal. But I've had the problem where, like, say you have a synth that's panning, like, whom, 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 whom.
Yeah.
And then you just get that whom.
Especially if I'm sampling from like the 70s, the 60s, where it's just hard
pan,
left, hard right. And I'm like, I hear when I put it into mono, when I turn the stereo into mono, it sounds great, but I'm like, wait a minute, something's a little off. Like, it's not, that could run into an issue if it's a little bit different that I'll hear it, but that's if I'm sending out my samples. Usually I won't really freak with my samples too much. Mm-hmm. I feel like where I really want to switch up the textures and sounds is with my drums. Well, that's where I've been having a lot of fun, but with my samples, since there's not that many that I have used right now that are stereo pedals, I'm not really sending out those samples as much right now.
Right. Okay, because I'm looking at it from like my shallow water video, which is this one right here. I was like, I wonder if I can send sounds out of the 4K, like samples.
Yeah.
Because I love manipulating samples. Drums, I'll just get them to knock as hard as I can within it.
Yeah.
I rarely run them into pedals unless it's like a master bus. But that's interesting to hear that you're just doing mainly your drums is your focus. So then I guess, random question, what's more important to you? Drums and like the rhythm or melodies and the samples?
That's a good question. I would go more for drums. Like rhythm-wise, I've said this before on my channel, but I'm not the best when it's like finger drumming and having grooves. Yeah. I use the tools that the MPC will give me to help me out with that. But when it comes down to the sound, that's something that gravitates me towards so much music that I'm like, that I'll listen to some of my favorite producers. It's not much, and it's actually funny that you're mentioning this, but I sometimes question, like, why do I like this song so much?
Yeah.
It's like, the beat itself is all right, but I'm like, why do I like this so much? But it's the sound, the textures, the way it's mixed, mastered, and I'm like, okay, so that's why I like this, and I keep coming back to the sound that it has. I try my best to study that sound, and for me, just adding that little extra of saturation to my drums goes so far. Wow. And I've A/B'd some without some of my external processing, and then with, and I'm like, no, I like what this is doing, and that to me is where I find my itch to make music, where I'm playing around with just different textures and sounds. Again, melody is cool, but I can tolerate that. But when it comes down to like the sound quality, that's where I'm like, I gotta go back to the song and listen to it over and over again. At least for me as a listener, that's important for me, definitely.
And then final question, has there been any major letdowns or even slight letdowns? Because I know at times I've gotten pedals where I'm like, oh, this is the one. And then you get it and you're just kind of like, Where's my
yes.
receipt? You know?
Dude, that's so funny. Yeah, I have one right now. Yeah.
Feel free to mention the name too if you want. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I actually have one because I was like, you know what? I want to get some distortion pedals.
Yeah.
I want to get some the EQ pedals. Yeah, and it's like, all right, cool. I got some good ones. There's one that I got that was more of an effects pedal that I tried out. It sounds great. It has what is it? A delay, a reverb, and it also has distortion.
So it's like a multi-effect.
Yeah. And it sounds great. The reverb's okay, but I was like, you know, the MPC gives you reverbs and delays, which sound pretty good. You know, they're not bad. They're not bad. So I actually like the reverb that the MPC has. I think is
the air.
It's the air verb. I use that one. I like the settings that it gives you. So I'm comparing. I'm like, it's okay. Like I can live without it. Again, I want to explore more. So if anybody has some recommendations, I'm more than open for that.
Let us know down below.
Because I'm with the effects right now, I haven't really found something that I'm like, yo, this is good.
Right.
So that's been something where I'm a little open when it comes down to like distortion, EQs, and all that stuff. There's actually some really dope ones that I'm rocking with that I really like.
So is that JHS and EQ?
Oh yeah, so this one right here, this one's my favorite one. This is the the JHS pedal right here. So this one right here, I actually like this, and that's my go-to pedal right there because it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. If you want to go clean, you could go clean. Yeah. If you want to saturate and drive your signal, you could definitely drive it. Has a high and low impedance, so if you really don't want to go distorted, you could do that. And also this little small parametric EQ right here, which has a 3. It almost reminds me like a little Pultec right here. Like I can push this so much.
Dude, I've never thought about getting like an EQ pedal.
This is so cool. Yeah. Well, from the research that I was doing, it's kind of like a guitar pedal, but not really. Like they kind of want to make it a little more like.
It's almost like a rack.
Yeah. So I find a lot of use on that. So I'll send my drums, I'll send vocals, a bass through that. Like the EQ on that, it's really nice because I'm able to push it. The EQs and the MPC, I can kind of push them, but it goes to a certain limit where it just breaks apart my sound. And when I'm pushing it with this, it does not break apart. I can really crank it like it sounds so good.
That's always kind of the thing when I use an outboard compressor, and I'm like, that sounds way better than like a VST compressor. And I think there is something to be said there with the digital compressors versus an analog compressors, and being able to push them really hard and have them just exist and not clip like they would in a digital. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I know I'm not the only one because there's actually another guitar pedal, is a compressor. Is the actually right here, I'm like popping all these other ones out. Is the Platform by Electro Harmonics. Yeah. It's a stereo compressor, so it's stereo. So the way I'm using that one is I'm coming out of my MPC, my stereo mix, straight into that Platform. Stereo in, and then coming out of that platform into my DAW and just printing my beat. My favorite plug-in compressor is the SSL by Waves.
Okay.
That is awesome on my stereo mix. Yeah. I really like that. But with this little small compressor, I'm pushing the compression, I'm slamming it, and it sounds good. Like I'm like, I like how this sounds, and I'm like, whoa, it's slamming, but it sounds really good. It's a different. You're able to get away with so much more, and it doesn't break apart that easy.
Yeah. So it sounds like, similarly, I feel as if we're kind of on the same headspace, which is funny because I thought you were completely using pedals for something completely different. But what I gravitate towards with a lot of the pedals is pedals that will allow me to do things that I would otherwise not be able to do, like on an MPC or in a DAW. And even if it's something as simple as like, let me play the delay, right? Or let me like mess around with these EQs live without having to click and like drag my finger around. And then more importantly is texture, right? Because in this day and age, we all have access to the same exact samples across the entire internet, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So what is something else that can kind of give you that edge or that differentiating factor? And like you're saying, the songs that you gravitate towards are those like, those weird textures and sounds, and you're like, how do they get that? And even one song I've had on repeat, weird guilty pleasure of mine, is by Lumidee. what is it called? It's her name is Lumity, but it's like Never Let You Go.
Wait, is it that? Is it what year did that come out?
Dude,
oh, okay. I remember that when I was like in. Okay, yeah. I remember that when I was like in junior high. Yeah, it still plays. I hear it. Okay.
That beat is
yeah.
The beat on there is like dirty and weird, but simple.
You see, I hear a lot of production. Actually, Kanye West talking about weird textures. I mean, he takes it to a whole different level. But I hear some textures in his drums, and I'm like, yo, like, I like that so much. Where I'm just like, I want to do something similar to that. Again, when it comes down to melodies, how the way I sequence my chops, that's cool. Don't get me wrong, it has to sound great, but I have more fun when I'm mixing and playing around with different textures. So that's why this was really, it's been really fun for me because I'm able to really stick on that and coming up with different sounds when it comes down to even distortion pedals, man. Like I'm having fun with this one. Like it just gives you bright colors and dark colors. And, different songs, different frequencies within the sample will make me want to go more darker with my drums or go more brighter with my drums. So that's been awesome to have. Again, the MPC now has the amp simulator. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've downloaded the update.
No.
What version?
I don't know, dude. I could do the USB hosting and audio interface. I think it was the last big one.
Was it the 2.10 with the interface, right? Where you can
2.10, 2.1.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's
same
right.
Thing, right? I think.
Yeah. So that one, well, now they have the amp simulator. So it's kind of like an amp simulator, which sounds good. It sounds good, but I'm like, I want to take it to a whole different level and bring these in, which sound
I think that's
different.
That's actually a smart idea. It's like, what sounds and effects do you gravitate the most towards? As long as it's not something basic like a reverb or a delay. And then maybe there's a pedal out there that could do that and a little bit more and kind of allow you to push it a little further.
Well, wait, say that question again?
It's not even really a question. I mean, it's just more of a random thought where it's like, how can I qualify what pedal I want to buy if I am interested in getting pedals and just kind of changing up the setup? It's like, well, I always use this and I always use the amp simulator.
Well, you see, the
maybe
pedal,
I should just buy a distortion.
The pedal that I bought was it had a delay, reverb, and distortion. So I was like, oh, that's cool, because that's the stuff that I would use. I actually love using a little bit of reverb on my drums, like on my kicks. So I'll put a little bit of reverb on the kick. So I'm like, I can play a lot with that. That gives me a lot of flexibility to have that one pedal. But again, I used it. The reverb on it was all right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I can use the one that I have.
You gravitated towards.
Yeah, but that's what I kind of want to get, like all in one of like a reverb, delay, and some distortion.
Right.
The EQ, I'm okay. I'm flexible with that. But those three, I know I can do a lot with just those three settings. There's so much I can do with that. Delays, reverbs. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned like just to kind of drive your effects live, performing those effects, because I am printing my beats. So as I'm printing my beats, I could definitely, kind of like the SP404.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You just do the take.
Exactly, which
do
is,
it again.
It's cool, you know, but I'm loving the pedals, man. Like the SP404 is cool, but I will overdo it with that. Like it's addicting to like go in there, but with the pedals, I feel like I'm having a little more fun. It's a little more mature of my process. Like a mature process, man.
Damn. Well, dude, Malo, my man. Appreciate it, bro.
No, thank you.
This was incredible, man.
Yeah, man, I'm all like talking my butt off right here.
No, it's good, and it's dope to know that you don't live too far. So hopefully we can do this again. Again, Malo Beats. Check his stuff down below, and if you're looking for a pedal, go to his channel, see what he's using with the MPC. I'm actually curious myself. I know he's been using that JHS EQ, and that thing sounds really good. One of my favorite compressors is also the Auto Boom, is another wild one.
Yeah, I definitely got to check yours out because I'm looking at yours right now. I'm like, oh man, there's a few of them that I'm looking at, like the water one that you.
Oh, the shallow water.
The shallow water one, yeah.
Yeah, but until then, my friends, you already know the drill. Hope to see you again next week. We both really appreciate you. Thanks again. Share the love, share the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Peace.
Peace.